Well, hello. Happy Tuesday, one and all. I'm Dan Ahlstrand, and this is the Todd Veinotte Show. Well, a lot of water has passed under the bridge since the last time you and I spoke, hasn't it? If you remember back to our show on Friday, Tim Houston, I asked him about an early election, and he said, well, they're watching things. Saturday, I think I saw a picture of him raking his leaves in Pictou County. Then Sunday, a quick trip to the city to visit the Lieutenant Governor, Arthur J. LeBlanc, and plunge the province into a $13 million election. Makes me wonder what happened between Friday at 11 o'clock when he left the studio here and noon on Sunday. Was it a walk in the leaves, perhaps? No matter what it was, here we are. Mayor Tim Houston will be over in Strawberry Hill today for an announcement. Liberal leader Zach Churchill will be visiting the popular Gateway Meat Market over in Westfall. Wonder what if he's going to pick up a steak for his barbecue tonight. And NDP leader Claudia Chender will visit Ocean Breeze. That complex obviously made a lot of headlines during the municipal campaign. It's about to be raised for some a development of apartment towers. Now, just to note, Vanessa passed to me before we came on the air, we're working to have all the party leaders in the studio during the campaign, some point during the campaign, to take your calls. And we're going to try and get all three of them into the studio at the same time, sometime along the way. But you can imagine with a 30-day short election campaign and three parties and three schedules, we'll do our very best to bring that to you. I think it's important that we give access to all three party leaders and have them answer your questions. Hear from me enough. And try to get them all in here for, I don't want to call it a debate. Maybe we'll call it a frank discussion. 1 week away now from the U.S. presidential elections at a fever pitch south of the borders. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris battled it out for the last remaining undecided voters. We'll bring you expanded coverage on Tuesday night next week, beginning at 9 o'clock in the evening. We'll connect up with our national news team to bring you the very latest on the election. That coverage will continue right through until 6 in the morning Wednesday. That's when our local team will take over. It'll be the format that you're used to hearing in both the morning and afternoon drives. So I hope you can tune in sometime during the evening. I'll be here Wednesday at our regular time to break down the results on what promises to be a very interesting night, to say the least. Big thanks to Vanessa Vandenez in the control room, as always, does amazing work keeping our show moving in the right direction. And a thanks to Steve Murphy, who took the chair over yesterday and, of course, knocked it out of the park like he always does. We're heading to the polls November 26th, but that doesn't mean you have to wait until Election Day to cast your ballot. And what you'll see when you cast your ballot will be a little bit different than many of you are used to, and depending on when you vote, it'll be different between people. Now, to give us the lowdown on what this election will look like from a voter's perspective, we welcome to the show the Director of Policy and Communications with Elections Nova Scotia, Naomi Shelton. Naomi, how are you?
Fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm well. Busy time, I imagine.
Yes, it is. Busy times here.
So let's start with the earliest time that somebody can vote. I understand that we will be able to cast a ballot, although it'll look a little different, and that starts tomorrow.
So legally, according to the Elections Act, all of our returning offices need to be open tomorrow for early voting. Some are already open, and as soon as returning office is open and ready, they can accept votes. So between now and tomorrow, they may start voting, but tomorrow they must start voting. So early voting period goes right up until Election Day. There's actually 24 days of voting available in this election. And before the close of candidate nominations on Wednesday, November the 6th, early voting at returning offices is done using the write-in ballot. So that is different than a traditional ballot because, of course, the candidate nominations are not closed, so not all candidate names are known. So the write-in ballot provides the names of the registered political parties and then a space for a voter to write in the candidate of their choice if they know the candidate's name. After the close of candidate nominations on Wednesday, November the 6th, e-ballot will start for early voting. So e-ballot will run from Thursday, November the 7th until Monday, November the 25th. And that is secure voting on a tablet at a voting location. So the voter goes to an early voting location, but they cast their ballot on a secured tablet electronically. And then on election day, there will be traditional paper ballots with the candidate names. And on election day, voters can vote at their assigned voting location or at the returning office in their electoral district. So during the early voting period, we have a vote anywhere system. So electors could vote early at any voting location in the province. So that's any returning office, community poll, or advanced poll. And you can easily find a voting location that's close to you by going on the Elections Nova Scotia website and using the Where Do I Vote tool. You just enter your address and it will give you the contact information for your returning office and then also other early voting options that are close to you, as well as your election day voting option.
Naomi, just for clarification, we just came off of a municipal election where we got a pin and we were able to vote online. That's not happening during the provincial campaign. The e-voting you're talking about has to happen at a polling station, correct?
Right. We do not have internet voting for this provincial election. It is in-person voting. So you do need to go to a voting location, but then you'll be casting your ballot if you vote early on a tablet.
Naomi, if I want to do this, if I want to cast my ballot early, what do I have to bring to the polling station?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and I'm glad you asked that because traditionally voters look for their voter information card in the mail. But as you may know, there is a pending postal strike potentially starting next week. So VIC cards may not arrive for voters for this election, but that's okay. Voters in Nova Scotia do not need a voter information card. If you've voted previously in Nova Scotia, you're already on the list of electors. You just need to go. It's convenient to take current ID with you, so ID that would have your address and your name. But if you don't have current ID, you can also take an oath to attest to your eligibility and vote that way. So just find a voting location close to you and go, and they will be able to help you to register and vote.
Is there a preferred type of identification that you're looking for, a driver's license, that kind of thing?
Yes, a photo ID that has your name and your current address is preferable. But like I said, voters don't need to have current ID. If you don't have ID with your current name or address, or your information is not up to date, you can also take an oath to attest to your eligibility and still vote.
Are we doing write-in ballots for people that are away?
Yes, the write-in ballot is the remote voting option for this provincial election. There's information on our website about the write-in ballot. What voters need to know about the write-in ballot process is that it's a multi-step process. You need to be aware of the process and the deadlines. So you have to apply to use a write-in ballot, then have the write-in ballot kit sent to you. Then you need to complete the kit and return it on time. All kits have to be back by 8 o'clock on election day when polls close in order to be counted. So the best thing to do for write-in ballot is to call the returning office in your electoral district, and they can help you to make arrangements that will work for you. They can even arrange to have a write-in ballot team come to your home and facilitate your vote there if you're not able to come out to vote.
You said this time around we're able to vote at in the early voting. We're able to vote at any polling station that is set up across the province. How are they identified, Naomi? How do we find them?
Well, you can go on the Elections Nova Scotia website. There is a tool that says, "Where do I vote?" And you simply put in your civic address. So if you put in your home address, it will give you the voting locations that are closest to you. But if you happen to be at your cottage or visiting a relative in a different part of the province, or if you happen to work in a different part of the province than where you live, you can put in the address of where you are, and it will tell you the voting locations that are closest to that address.
And then you just walk in and tell them who you are, show them your ID, and you can vote.
Yes, that's exactly the process.
Naomi, on election day, do those rules change? Do you have to vote at a specific polling location?
Yes, so on election day, voting is at your assigned voting location or the returning office in your electoral district. So again, if you use the Where Do I Vote tool on the Elections Nova Scotia website, it will tell you what your assigned election day voting location is and the returning office information for your electoral district.
Election Day Eve. How do we see results? How can we, other than, of course, listening to this radio station, how else can we find the results?
Well, after the polls close at 8 o'clock on Election Day, we will begin to have the returns, and you can watch the live feed on the Elections Nova Scotia website. And because of e-ballot for early voting, those results should be returned quickly and efficiently. We're seeing trends in not only just Nova Scotia, but in across the country where voters are choosing early voting options. So the highest volume of votes are cast before Election Day. So those early votes that are cast on the e-ballot system are counted very quickly because they are electronic votes, so their count happens instantaneously. We don't have to wait to hand count paper ballots. So the Election Day counts will come in a little bit after the early voting counts.
Naomi, lots of information there for our listeners. Where can they read this on the website?
Right on the front page of the Elections Nova Scotia website, there is a link to the PGE page and the provincial general election page, and it has all the information. It's there, it's easy, it's accessible, and there's also a 1-800 number so that the public can call if they have questions.
Naomi, appreciate your time. I know you're busy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you helping us to get information out to the voters. It's important for voters to know their voting options so that we can have this election work for them.
Naomi, appreciate it.
Thank you.
That is Naomi Shelton. She is the Director of Policy and Communications with Elections Nova Scotia. All kinds of different options. A little bit different than the municipal election that we just went through. Well, some of you did. Less than 40% of you did. But a little bit different. You can vote at any polling station. There is no internet voting or on this in this election. But you can pick out a polling station between tomorrow and the day before Election Day, which is the Monday, the 25th. And you can vote anywhere. So if you're out and about or you're at work, I think last time there was one in the building here. I don't know if it's still here or not, but I voted on my way to work. So it was that easy. And we will, of course, be bringing you those results on election nights, as we do for most elections, if not all. And we'll be here and we'll bring you those results as soon as they come in. We need to stop down and take a break. But when we come back on the other side of it, a conversation with UNIFOR, upset at the Premier's call of this snap election in Nova Scotia. We'll find out why when we speak with Atlantic Regional Director Jennifer Murray. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. We're back in minutes. Welcome back. Hope you're having a lovely Tuesday as we continue to roll along towards the November 26th election, as the campaign leaders fan out across the city. Interesting, and it might be something you want to discuss as we roll into the open hour. Of course, that happens at 11 o'clock. All three leaders have spent their entire 2 days or 2.5 days of this election campaign in HRM. Nobody's ventured outside of HRM yet. Announcements all over the place today. In HRM, yesterday as well, all of the campaigns kicked off in HRM. Obviously, it's the population base, but I wonder if the rural areas are starting to say, hey, what about us? And we'll keep an eye on that as we move forward. Tim Houston's premature election call is interrupting collective bargaining for thousands of healthcare workers in the lowest paid classifications in acute care, long-term care, and group homes. This from UNIFOR. The Council of Health Support Unions, made up of representatives from UNIFOR, NSGEU, and CUPE, began discussions with the province and employers in September, with many dates scheduled through to the end of December. Aside from its abandoning its own commitment to set a set election date in July of 2025, Premier Houston is interrupting vital healthcare negotiations, this delay jeopardizing improvements to healthcare workers' lives and to the care Nova Scotians receive, said UNIFOR Atlantic Regional Director Jennifer Murray. And Jennifer Murray is on the phone with us this morning. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you, Todd, and thanks for the invite.
So tell me a little bit about what happens now. Do these negotiations essentially stop until the election's over?
Yeah, obviously we're not pleased with the Houston government's decision to call an early election. I don't think this was very well thought through. Yes, certainly the bargaining, we were given notice this morning that bargaining has been suspended and until a new government will be in place.
So a whole month you're going to lose here of negotiating this new contract.
So we've kept our dates. We're going to keep our bargaining dates that have been scheduled in December. However, it's going to take until the government is actually put into place before any real wage increase decisions and those kinds of things can actually be bargained. So we're probably looking into the new year.
Has this bargaining unit been without a contract?
Yeah, so this bargaining unit is the last of the 4 different bargaining tables to go to the table. This collective agreement expired in October of 2023. And we were certainly looking, and the last time that they had bargained was before the pandemic. So you can imagine what has happened since the pandemic with an affordability crisis that we're all experiencing right now. Putting food on the table is not easy at this time. And obviously these are essential and very important classifications of workers that are without a contract and without wage increases, benefit improvements, and any other improvements that have already been bargained and expected for these workers.
Jennifer, is there any concern in the membership that, with a new government, regardless of who wins, there could be new ministers, could be, a whole new bargaining team sitting across the table?
Absolutely. You never know what's going to happen in an election. Let's look at, our next door neighbors and what happened in New Brunswick. And, workers were mobilized there. Workers were, had great expectations and certainly they got out and made sure that their voices were heard. And so, yes, there's a lot of concern that a new government is going to change the dynamic at the collective bargaining table. That's always a very big concern of ours and our members. For sure.
What are you expecting to hear, or what would you like to hear from the leaders now that we're in this campaign?
Obviously we have priorities, but in healthcare in particular, it's incredibly disruptive. It wasn't entirely necessary, going to the table to get a larger majority that Nova Scotians have already given you a majority government. And to go to the table and disrupt people's lives like this is really quite upsetting. So I would say that, I think there needs to be a commitment, and there's certainly an expectation from the Council of Unions and UNIFOR in particular that these workers are going to be made whole and treated very respectfully when this new government is put into place.
Are you going to have an opportunity to sit with the 3 leaders now that they're on the campaign trail and discuss these issues? At least do you hope you do?
I certainly would like to have an opportunity. UNIFOR is not shy when it comes to politics, and we certainly had a very large part in mobilizing our members in New Brunswick, and certainly we'll be engaging our members the same way in Nova Scotia. We are seeing, an upheaval of a whole bunch of political elections across the country. And UNIFOR is certainly at the forefront of much of that, those elections and those outcomes. But I know that we have been speaking with Claudia Chender's office from the Nova Scotia NDP, but would welcome an opportunity to discuss with Premier Houston and with Minister Churchill as well, and be able to provide some insight into what our priorities are and what we would like to see as their priorities as well.
Jennifer, this group, acute care workers, long-term care, and group home workers, what are they looking for in their new contract? Is it solely wages, or are you looking for others?
there's always room for improvement. We're never looking to go backwards, but obviously, there's always room for improvements in language, making lives better in the workplace. But, when we're looking at benefit improvements and wage gains, we're talking about even larger opportunity, which expands beyond the borders of the workplace, in the community, the economy, but the opportunity to live a more affordable life with your family and provide more for your family. And so, when we're talking about the lowest wage classifications in the healthcare sector, certainly they deserve some really significant wage increases, to actually reflect the cost of living in Nova Scotia. So, that's a big part of it. That's always a big part of collective bargaining, but never the only thing that we seek when we go to the bargaining table.
With this being the last bargaining unit to come up with a contract and not have one now, and that being delayed, is there an imbalance in the system because of that?
I would say yes, there definitely is. I would say, like we always like to bring forward the gains we've made at other tables, but the expectation will be that the delay in this bargaining, we will be seeking for the new government, to be making them whole and to be recognizing the fact that there is a significant delay here that wasn't necessary.
Jennifer, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it.
That is Jennifer Murray from UNIFOR, as negotiations with the last group of workers. We've been following these negotiations for some time, right? We got close to a strike almost on the last set. And now with the election underway, negotiations have stopped. And that's going to push everything back by 30 days. I'm going to suggest it's probably going to push things back right until the new year. And that's not going to make for a quick contract, let's say, on this last group of healthcare workers. Need to stop and take another break. As you heard during our first interview this morning, there could be a labor disruption at Canada Post, and that might impact you getting a voter registration card, your Christmas cards, or your parcels. A conversation with Cup W Atlantic Canada Director Jeff Callahan when we return. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show, back after the news. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Dan Ahlstrand along with you here on a Tuesday morning. Some concern out there. Postal workers voting overwhelmingly in favor of strike action if no progress at the bargaining table is made with Canada Post. Canadian Union of Postal Workers has been bargaining new contracts for its two largest bargaining units. That's Urban Operations Unit and the Rural and Suburban Mail Carriers Unit for almost a year. Now, strike votes took place across Canada between the 9th of September and the 20th of October, and the results of that show 95% plus support for the negotiating committees to use or to be ready to strike if necessary, the so-called strike mandates. Very pleased to welcome to our program today to put a little perspective on this for us is the Cup W Atlantic Canada Regional Director, Jeff Callahan. Jeff, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I am well, sir. That is a rather large strike mandate.
It is. Our members come out in big numbers to give our National Executive Board that mandate. Members are extremely frustrated at the progress at the bargaining table. We've been there, as you said, for almost a year now, and with little to show. Our members are getting extremely frustrated. What
are the union's demands in this new contract? What are you looking for?
So we had a lot of demands that centered around issues that affect the workers on a regular day-to-day basis. Work methods that Canada Post has unilaterally introduced, wages, of course, and benefits are top of the list as well. But there's a lot of long-standing problems that we've never really got an opportunity to negotiate a settlement with Canada Post due to successive governments intervening in the process and forcing an arbitrated decision, which nobody wins at. So we're hoping that this is a round that both parties would be able to come together, understanding where both parties are in regards to what their main issues are, and trying to come to a settlement before the 3rd.
And that's when you're in a legal strike position, correct?
Yeah, the November 3rd is the date, the earliest date that either Canada Post can lock out or CPW could strike.
Is there a potential for a lockout?
Canada Post has threatened that at the bargaining table now for a number of months, that they will lock us out. We're hoping they don't do that. I mean, as long as the parties are talking at the bargaining table, we think there's always a likelihood of coming to an agreed settlement. If you're not there, it means that you can't do that. So we're hoping that Canada Post does not lock out, and that they remain at the bargaining table to try to get a negotiated settlement.
From a union perspective, after that deadline passes, you're looking obviously at job action. What would that look like? Would it be rotating? Would it be a full-out strike, or is it too early to say? Yeah,
I think it's a bit too early to say, Dan. At this point, our fight is with our employer. It's not with Canadians who, our workers have remained at work throughout the pandemic. We kept Canada Post going. We kept the Canadian economy going through that period of time. So our fight is not with Canadians. We don't want to be interrupting them, but at the same time, we need to be able to put pressure on Canada Post to back away from some of its negative concessions that they've maintained at the bargaining table.
And I understand that, Jeff, but I mean, it's November. We've got an election. Voter cards are going out. Christmas is right around the corner. This will impact Canadians, will it not? If there's a labor disruption.
Absolutely, but you say we've been at the table with Canada Post for over a year now, and even though the union has moved on issues, Canada Post has not. So it takes two parties to come to a negotiated settlement. If one is digging in, despite the other party, saying that, look, this is a strike issue for us, then what will the outcome be? We're hoping that it doesn't lead to a strike or a lockout. But at the end of the day, there's only so many options out there for workers if they're trying to, push their employer into a better collective agreement, better working conditions and wages for them.
In your release, safe working conditions was highlighted as one of the negotiation points. What are you looking at for improvements to safety for your workers?
So Canada Post has introduced a new delivery method. It's called a separate sort and delivery, which has our members doing, instead of having one letter carrier, for example, doing sorting up their route and then tying it out and then going and deliver it. Now they'll have a separate carrier sorting the route and a separate carrier delivering it. So somebody is going to be doing sortation for 8 hours, somebody is doing a delivery for 8 hours. The new method has not been, we've not had an ergonomic study test on it yet. So we've seen the injury rates increase, and that's one of the big demands union has at the bargaining table is to have Canada Post stop SSD, do the proper study to find out what the long-term effects of this delivery method is going to be on its employees. How
did it work before? Was one person did that all and they kind of mixed it up?
Yeah, so periodically Canada Post would do a restructure exercise, taking into consideration like mail volumes and all that kind of thing. And they have a system in place that they would develop so many letter carriers for a particular geographical region, and those letter carriers would be responsible for the sortation of the products that'd be taken out for delivery, and then they would simply, once their sortation was done, they would go down the street to deliver them. Canada Post has changed that now to so that the sortation is separated from the delivery function. And it may not seem like a big deal to Canadians, but we're extremely concerned about longevity of how long people will be able to maintain these jobs, knowing that what the negative impacts on their body are going to be over the long term. So that's something we brought to the bargaining table and trying to get a negotiated settlement with Canada Post, and that's still one of the issues remaining at this point.
Jeff, wages are always a part of this. What are you looking for, an increase?
Absolutely. So we've looked at we took smaller wage settlements in the past to get Canada Post through the pandemic period. and now it's time for the workers to gain their share. We've seen other increases in the public sector. We're not saying that we're at the high end of that by any means, but we're looking for a fair collective agreement, taking into consideration the cost of living and what postal workers have lost probably over the last 8 or 9 years leading up to the pandemic and since. So it's an important issue for our members, but it's probably one of the last ones that'll be on the table. We understand that, we want to fix a bunch of problems at Canada Post. They all, most of them will take some money to fix. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that there is a good wage increase, a fair wage increase for our members at the end of the day.
It sounds like it's going to be a hefty ask. It sounds like it's going to be a significant increase.
Well, I think anything over, Canada Post first offer of 3.5%, which is extremely insulting. We have COLAs in our collective agreement. They're not rolled into the collective agreement, so it's just if the cost of living goes up a little bit, there's a trigger. The cost of living went up 3.6% for the last year for a period of last year, and what Canada Post is offering at 3% would be less than what we got in COLA last year. So, there seems to be money for all kinds of things with Canada Post. They spent their way into an $800 million deficit, building a new postal plant, state-of-the-art postal plant outside of Toronto, the Albert Jackson facility, at about $500 million. They're buying a brand new fleet of electric vehicles. But yet it seems that every time that the workers come to the bargaining table, the numbers for wage increase are incredibly small. So our members are extremely frustrated with that. They want to be treated fairly. Nobody's getting rich working at Canada Post, but they just want to be paid fairly for the jobs they do for Canadians every day.
Jeff, how far apart are you? Are you looking for a double-digit increase or something along those lines?
I wouldn't say necessarily double at this point, but I think that what Canada Post is offering is on the extremely low end of any offer that would not be considered by our membership. So, I think that at the end of the day, there needs to be a recognition of the jobs that these workers have done for Canada Post and continue to do for Canada Post and Canadians every day. And the fact that we did settle for a smaller increase back in 2018, 19, and 20 to get Canada Post through the pandemic. And that was an understanding between the parties then. So now that we're sitting across the table from the employer, that's the same old story as, we're broke, we can't afford anything, the sky is falling. Which, if that is the case, how does somebody like Doug Ettinger continue to be the CEO of Canada Post if they are if they are now broke? This is somebody who's taken a very recognized and stable Crown corporation and driven it right into the ditch. So it's either they're playing a little bit of politics at the table, which we think they are, or the federal government needs to do something with the CEO of Canada Post.
Jeff, any concern from the union perspective that because Canada Post is so vital to the economy that the federal government will step in again and legislate you back to work and force arbitration?
We're hoping that doesn't happen, Dan. Some of the problems, or a lot of the problems that we're dealing with now, is because successive governments have done that. And then we've seen recently with the Teamsters, with CN Rail, the implementation of Section 107 by the Minister of Labour. So those are not conducive to a good relationship between employers and employees, employers and unions. We're supposed to have, as a democratic principle of this country, the right to join a union and negotiate fair and freely with your employer. And when the government unilaterally does that, and we think that's what Canada Post is waiting for. They're digging in. They've been intransigent at the table. We're feeling more and more that the government will come to their rescue, and again, there'll be problems that need to be corrected, long-term problems that won't get addressed in an arbitrated settlement or one that's mandated by the government.
Jeff, I appreciate your time, and I think I can speak for people here in HRM. We hope that something gets settled because we really don't need a strike right now.
Yeah, us too, Dan. I agree with you 100%.
Have a good day.
All right. Thanks much.
That is Jeff Callahan, Cup W Atlantic Canada Regional Director. A looming strike November 5th at Canada Post, right before Christmas. Goodness gracious. We need to stop and take another break. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. Hope you're having a fantastic day. Open hour coming up after the news at the top of the hour. Lots to talk about. The election campaign in full swing. Just saw a release from Liberal leader Zach Churchill, who is, if elected, is planning to reduce or remove HST from all food at the grocery store. Now, I'm sitting here thinking about this, and I don't see a lot of HST on my grocery receipts. I had a couple in my wallet because we know that HST isn't on a lot of things at the grocery store, but he's suggesting that this will apply to things like granola bars and pre-made salads and rotisserie chickens. The release from the Liberals saying that will put more breathing room into our grocery budget. He also promising to increase grocery store competition by removing restrictive covenants that limit where new grocery stores can open. I think anytime that there's more competition in the market is a good thing, right? Halting all payments to Sobeys, by redirecting funds to develop a comprehensive marketing and growth strategy. This comes from the Nova Scotia Loyal program. He says he also wants to support independent grocers by providing grants and loans and invest in affordable food programs by building new food hubs, which I'm not really sure what they are, expanding programs to buy excess food from farmers and investing in mobile food markets. That's the latest from the campaign trail from the Liberal Party and leader Zach Churchill. We know that Claudia Chender is today out at Ocean Breeze, which was a very strong topic of discussion here on this program during the municipal campaign. That's the development that is going to be knocked down to make a new development and displacing the people that were living there. Not really sure what that announcement is. We'll bring you that when we see it. And the progressive conservative leader, Tim Houston, is over here at Strawberry Hill today. And I'm assuming that's a housing announcement because there's that big proposed development that has been on the books here for Strawberry Hill. So we'll keep all of that stuff on our radar for you today as we move forward in the election campaign. And if you missed the top of the show, Vanessa is working very busily behind the glass today and for the next few days to try and secure some time with all the party leaders like we did with the premier on Friday. And we will try and get each of them in here for a good hour so that we can ask them some questions and you can ask them some questions and we will move forward and try and get them all together. I don't know if that's going to work, but we're going to try and make it happen, and we'll try and get all three of them together in the same room at the same time. I'll wear my referee shirt that day and carry a whistle, and we'll let them have a discussion. I don't really want to call it a debate. I think we should call it like a frank discussion. Debates get overused. Let's just talk about the issues. Let's have a little round table and chat, right? And we'll offer an opportunity to you as well to ask questions during that period, if it happens. So lots of things in the works. We're still early in this election campaign, and as you can imagine, with three party leaders having to move about the province with all kinds of things planned, it's going to be a challenge. But Vanessa's a miracle worker, so no pressure. But she will she'll be available and she'll do it. She'll make it. She'll make it work. I fully done. And you never know. There's some discussion that maybe we might see Todd Veinotte come back soon. So no pressure on him either. But the latest update I have on Todd is that he's, as you heard from Steve yesterday, he's recovering, feeling better each day, and he's looking maybe mid-November-ish to make an appearance here on the program. I know he's in a bit of hiding these days because the Yankees are terrible, but I'm sure he'll get over it soon. I read a headline, and I hope Todd's listening. I read a headline today that said that the New York Yankees are a good farm club for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Ouch. Anyway, that's all upcoming. I got a couple of emails throughout the day yesterday with when Steve had the counselors on the hot seat on. What a great segment that was. And Steve always does a fantastic job. I got an email from, where did we get this from? Talking about the election. It said, sorry, I was so gassed about another broken promise by a politician. Forgot to say how much that I like to hear Steve Murphy on the air. He's excellent. Mind you, I like Todd a lot. Listen virtually every day in the city, to City News during the week. He went on to say that I just heard Steve Murphy talking about Tim Houston said regarding his reasons for calling an election, basically needing support to support his programs. I think the Conservatives have a majority currently. If that is true, it is, and he has a majority, he does, then why does calling an election now increase his ability to expand his vision? The last I heard on the news, mostly on City in Halifax, is that we have a medical system problem, which I believe is a big problem. It's on the Conservative side amongst other issues. I don't live in Halifax anymore, but I listen virtually every day, and I will come back when the medical system is improved. I'm guessing that's going to be a while. And that came to us through the email yesterday. I also got an email today from Lee on some of the comments made by Councillor. Sean Cleary is in a judicial recount, so he's a councillor today because the old council's still there. But I did see some of them turning in their keys yesterday. But once that recount is done, and if the votes hold, then Sean Cleary would have won District 9 during the election. But this goes on to say, I know it's murky, but there's some rules we have to follow. Municipal councillors voted in to represent their constituents' wishes. Bike enthusiast Sean Cleary got less than 30% of the vote, yet believes more bike lanes should be put in because he likes them. It's time that we have a plebiscite on bike lanes. So I'm guessing 80% or more of the population just don't want them. We're in a hilly, cold, rainy city most of the year, not suitable for bike lanes. It's time to put this nonsense to a binding vote once and for all. You wonder why the public doesn't vote? Politicians don't listen. That's why. And that from Lee. So I'm going to put that question out to you today. Because we've talked about this, and this is not necessarily what we exclusively have to talk about during the open hour. But is it time? A big chunk of municipal politicians were reelected a week ago with all of the discussion on things like bike lanes. And most of the incumbents, with the exception of two that reoffered, were reelected. Now, I know we poll a very small segment of the population, but it's growing on this talk show. And from judging from the calls that I get on these bike lanes, there's not a lot of support for them here. With a majority of the incumbents back at council, a lot of new voices, but I don't think enough to change the direction on bike lanes based on some of the promises and the conversations that we had with the new candidates that have been elected. I didn't talk to them all, but most of them I did. Is it time that we put this to the people? Now, I get it. We just had an election, so we're probably going to have to wait 4 years. But is this something that there should be a plebiscite on and the results be binding? Because we've had plebiscites in this province before where the results were non-binding, Sunday shopping, and it's just a gigantic waste of money and time. Just something to think about when we throw open the telephone lines right after the news at the top of the hour. Open lines on Tuesday. Looking forward to it. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back after the news. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. It's time for the open hour. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Everything's on the table today. Anything you want to talk about, this is your opportunity. I read some of the promises made by the Liberal Party today about taking HST off of your groceries. Is that going to change your budget at the grocery store? I was just chatting with my colleagues during the break. It doesn't look like HST is off. Don't get me wrong. Anytime that we remove taxes, it's a good thing. But I don't think it's a game changer because most groceries that we get don't have HST on them anyway, right? But I get it. What I did like to hear, and it's something that I've talked about on the program many times, is the need for more competition in the grocery market, and the Liberals promising to do that. You know what's not being talked about during this election campaign? We'll get to the phone lines in a second here, but you know what's not being talked about, at least thus far, and to be fair, we're only a couple days in, but there was a 2-week lead up to this election campaign when the Premier, Tim Houston, was making all kinds of announcements. What's not being talked about is crime. There was another shooting on Robie Street at Quinpool last night, right? Stores are getting robbed blind. I saw a stat, and we're going to talk to the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. They did a study on this, but the number was 48% of businesses in Atlantic Canada, small businesses, reported being a victim of a theft. Now, here's an opportunity, I think, for the three leaders to take the initiative and be a leader on this and fix it, because crime impacts everybody, be it on your person or, shoplifting seems like a victimless crime, but it ends up costing us because the prices go up. Let's head to the phone lines. Enough of me. The number 902-405-6000. We welcome Len to the program. Len, how are you?
Not too bad yourself.
I'm good. What's on your mind today?
Well, number one is I'm just listening to you about these promises that Churchill makes. And he's lucky if he wins his seat this next election. What a ridiculous thing to make about taking the tax off of things that are really not important. If he wanted to take the tax off of something, take the tax off of all food that you buy from the grocery store, not items that most people don't care about. I think it's, these promises that Churchill makes are ridiculous. And another thing is, he comes up with stuff against the Conservative Party. And I'm not saying I'm a Conservative or a Liberal or NDP, but now he's questioning something about the money being spent by the Conservatives before the election was called. I mean, these are so ridiculous that make no difference to the voter. They're absolutely ridiculous. The other thing I want to ask you, Dan, is when you vote in people, in politicians, aren't they supposed to listen to their people in their ridings? And most of the people in Halifax have talked about not wanting any more bike lanes, and yet these councillors are in favor of more bike lanes. Why don't they listen to the people that they are supposed to represent? I don't understand that one bit. Why these people that we vote in, and of course, a little while back, most people that called up told people, when you vote this time, eliminate all these councillors that are in there because of what they're doing. So I don't know what to say about it. It seems so ridiculous. Another thing is, my last thing is, I don't really care about the post office if they go on strike. I don't deal with the post office anymore in most things, because instead of buying presents, which are very expensive now to send, I send personal gift certificates to my people or money orders. That's so much easier, and let them buy what they want. And anyway, you have a great day.
Thanks, Len. 902-405-6000. Len, not happy with the announcement today that a Liberal government in Nova Scotia would remove the HST from groceries, saying that they should take the tax off everything. Well, I think Zach Churchill promised that, but it was months and months ago. It was in February that he wants to knock HST down by 2%. I don't have my most recent grocery receipt. I'm going to have to see if I can go and find one, but I don't think I get charged a lot of HST on my grocery bill because a lot of groceries we buy are HST exempt. So I don't know how big an impact that will make. What I did like to hear was somebody trying to foster more independent groceries here. We've seen that many people try and many people fail at building community groceries, and some are successful. Don't get me wrong; they don't all fail, but it's a tough hill to climb when you have to compete against giants like Sobeys and like Loblaw. I'd love to see more independent grocers, like it was in the, and I'm going to put quotes around this, in the old days, right? Tony, how are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
I am well. What's on your mind today?
Real quick about Ocean View. Ocean View was sold in 2014 for $4 million to an Ontario developer through the National Land Bank, or whatever the hell it's called, when Shannon Park was shut down. Speaking of Shannon Park, it's still sitting there idle, and nobody knows. I tried to chase down the history of Ocean View. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Ocean View. And I could not get it. Ocean Breeze. I could not get it past that 2014. Who had it now? How much did they sell it for? The city and the province didn't do anything with Shannon Park. They wanted to build a stadium. That's all you heard, was build a stadium.
Shannon Park's owned by the feds, is it not?
Well, it is. That's what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But a part of it was sold. Ocean Breeze is right on that corner of Shannon Park, I believe. That was government housing at one time, military government housing.
Likely, yep.
If you look at it, and so that didn't have to be sold. The city could have gone in and bought it for $4 million. It was evaluated at $19 million, Dan, and it was sold for $4 million to a developer in Ontario who was farsighted enough to see this is a bargain, and I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to make money on it, and they are. So it's not up to. It's just not done right. At the time, it wasn't an important issue. Housing was okay. There wasn't down to 1% availability. But anyway, that's not what I called about. I called about the election.
Yep.
I'm getting kind of tired. Zach Churchill blasting the crap out of Houston. Well, didn't Houston just give him $42 million to continue a boondoggle on that damn ferry?
They did.
Just gave his area, $42 million to run that ferry for 2 more years. It's never made a profit, and it's not a part of the infrastructure, the municipal or the federal or provincial infrastructure. It only helps that small area, and maybe if they do okay, they help the vacation issues. So, I'm really tired of that crap. And listening to hospitals and et cetera, we got to take care of health care. Daryl Dexter brought, what was his, $160,000 ships are built here. How many ships you seen built? 1. You know where it is? Or 2, actually. One of them is in Hawaii. It nearly sank, and they can't get it home until they get it repaired. So that's a big win. McNeil, what did McNeil do? The only claim to fame that McNeil has is State of Blazes home. He did a fair job in handling the COVID issue. But as far as doing anything else, tell me what he did. I remember, and I'm going to apologize to Gary, but Gary, the gentleman that advocates for seniors, he blasted both of these people every time to get some more housing built for the elderly, or long-term care facilities, or long-term health care, period. What do you see done? Nothing. So, and now Houston's been in power for 3 years, 8 months, right? Or 3 years, 2 months, pardon me. And he is expected to fix all the holes in the dike. The guy is doing all right. He's not doing great. I disagree with some of the money he spends. I hate that he went on a boondoggle for that hotel for $37 million. That's probably going to cost $100 million. But He's done a good job. His party has done a good job. As far as the bike lanes go, I'm tired of clearing that we got to have more bike lanes and the money comes from the feds. Well, just like Steve Murphy said yesterday, one pocket. It all comes out of one pocket. Bike lanes are not going to repair the health system. They are not going to fix the housing system. You're going to have a small population, 0.1 of the population, that's going to use those bike lanes. Zero. It's not worth it. You mentioned plebiscites, and then you mentioned, well, they don't mean anything, and you're right. There's no way that a plebiscite would do anything except spend money because they're not held to do what the local people say. When you have a referendum, you can't even have a referendum. It has to be a plebiscite because the two are different. If you ask for a referendum, then it's binding, is my understanding. Is my understanding. You never hear that. I've been to a couple of meetings here locally for our area out in East Lawrencetown, and they get pretty contentious, but nothing gets done. Nothing gets done. It's lip service. I'm telling you, everybody should figure it out that Houston has called for this election to bolster his position when the Conservatives knock the Prime Minister out of office. And the Prime Minister is holding on by the tips of his fingers. You can see the nail marks on the wall. And I don't know why everybody's surprised about this. I think this is a hell of a play on Houston's part.
Tony?
And the feds have... Yes.
Out of time. I'm up against the break. I appreciate your call.
Okay, buddy. Thank you for the time. You have a great day.
902-405-6000. The open hour continues after the breaks. Welcome back. As you just heard in the commercial there, doing my debut on Mortgage 101 this weekend, sitting in for Todd, who's still recovering, and looking forward to having a conversation with Clinton on Saturday morning, 11 o'clock Sunday, repeat as well. So make sure that you tune in for that. Let's go right back to the telephone lines, 902-405-6000, and welcome Mike to the program. Mike, how are you?
Good morning, Mr. Ahlstrand. How are you this morning? A shout out to Todd. Looking forward to his return.
Me too.
So we have a conundrum. I confirmed it this morning. Mr. Paul Russell is running MLA Zone 47, Sackville, Cobequid.
Yeah, they announced it.
Imagine if he would have been elected,
right, for
the municipal elections. How would we have handled that? How much would it have cost us?
Right.
Now, when I speak for at least 50 plus people. And when I say that we are all in a conundrum because we all wanted to vote PC, but because of the representative presented to us by the Tories, we are not going to be voting for that party. And that's going to hurt us, and it's going to hurt the party. But our conundrum is, who do we vote for? We certainly don't want to vote for the Liberal Party because we have no trust in them. So it leaves us with the
NDP.
Yeah, that's it. the unbeknownst NDP. Now, it's unfortunate that our premier had not researched or had not searched or peeled the onion on Mr. Russell, because I'm sure he would have agreed with most of us that live in the lower Sackville, First Lake area. He would agree with us that the transparency, or the lack thereof transparency, that Paul Russell provided us for the last 4 years was unbelievable. It started with the water park that was supposed to be in First Lake that we did not know nothing about, and then all of a sudden he comes out and he was advocating for it, and then not advocating for it. Then there was the baseball field. Nobody knew about it. He never communicated to the people of Lower Sackville what was going on and what happened. The whole bunch of people moved in there with tents. And then there was the mini homes, or the pallet shelters, and the mini homes. The lack of transparency at the municipal level from Paul Russell was unbelievable. It was just terrible. So what should I expect when I go now into my provincial elections? What kind of trust am I going to have in the PCs if they choose the wrong candidates right off the bat?
It's a great question, Mike. I'm really glad that you joined the show today, because I thought the very same thing. Not to mention that Paul Russell just lost a week ago, lost the election for the municipality. So it was an interesting choice to me.
Yeah, I've lost a lot of confidence in our current premier. I just don't get it. Why would he do that? Now, I'm not speaking for the whole Lower Sackville First Lake area, but I can guarantee you, once we found out about it, and it was actually on Sunday when he was captured on the on video standing to the right of the premier when he announced the election. Mm-hmm. Our phones and our texts started flashing all over the place, saying, "What the heck? What is going on?" So I'm reaching out to all Lower Sackville people that had lost faith in Paul Russell. It's again our turn to make our voice heard, and it's unfortunate for the PC. And if they lose because of Paul Russell, well, so be it. But I can guarantee you, many of Lower Sackville people, many in that zone, will not be voting because of Paul Russell and the lack of transparency he brought forward while he was a municipal representative. Thank you very much for the time. I'm getting off my soap.
All right, Mike, I appreciate it. Hope you feel better. 902-405-6000. It really was an interesting, because there was the specter of this was following former councillor Paul Russell throughout the entire election, that he had eyes on running provincially. And I think it was one of the reasons why he lost this most recent municipal election. And then, 4 days later, we see him as a candidate. As for disenfranchised voters there, not going to tell you what to do. We'll never do that from this chair. Not tell you who to vote for. We'll never do that from this chair. What I will ask you to do is just to research everybody in the riding that's running, and take a look at it, and then make your own decision from there. That's really all I can tell you. I hope that it doesn't disenfranchise those people enough not to take part in the process and not vote, because you all know how I feel about that. But it was an interesting choice to select Paul Russell for that riding. I kind of raised an eyebrow in my household when I saw that over the weekend or earlier this week. We need to stop down, take another break. The open hour continues on the other side of the news. If you're on hold, you'll get on the air. If you're thinking about calling in, there are a number of lines open. The number 902-405-6000. We're back after the break. Welcome back. I talked about Liberal leader Zach Churchill's promises of the day. It'd be we could have a segment. Dun, 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 promise of the day. Anyway, Vanessa's like, yeah. Anyway, he said he was going to take GST off of all groceries and foster some independent grocery stores, which I think is a good idea. The HST, I don't know how much impact that's going to make. Would be remiss if I didn't mention what the Premier announced today, or Tim Houston announced today, the PC leader. Said earlier, I guess it was yesterday, that he's going to increase minimum wage in Nova Scotia to $16.50 an hour. I did some searching during the break. In April 1st of this coming year, minimum wage is going to go went up to $15.20. So April 1st of 2024, we went to $15.20. He wants to increase it to $16.50. So for easy math, we'll say $1.25, $1.20 additional money. And this morning announced that and this is the quote right from his Facebook page, the McKay and McDonald bridge tolls are nothing more than a tax on getting to work or getting home to see your family. A re-elected PC government will scrap the bridge tolls. Then he went on to say it'll save you time, which I don't know how that does. There's still going to be a jam at the toll booths, just the way the thing's designed. Save you money and keep you moving. So that is the promises today from the PC leader, Tim Houston. Claudia Chender at Ocean Breeze today, taking the government to task over affordable housing and laying out some of the plans, no concrete plans, but laying out how they're going to address the housing shortage with affordability and stock and that kind of thing. So that's what the campaign trail has given us today thus far. The telephone lines are open, 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000, taking the bridge toll off the McKay and McDonald bridges. Wonder what Halifax Harbour Bridges thinks about the whole thing. Anyway, let's go back to the phones and welcome Bill to the show. Bill, how are you?
Not too bad, sir. I like what you're talking and thinking about the bike lanes. Do keep on top of that. I mean, really get right on that one. Now, I'll tell you this bike lane thing. I can't believe that they're getting this kind of money. How they ever got it in the first place to put all these bike lanes in. It's bad enough the bike lanes. The part that really disturbs me on the bike lane issue is putting all these little posts up when, every I don't know, every 6 feet or so, there's another post stuck up. When they could maybe eliminate 5, I'd say out of 6, eliminate 5 of them. That's the start. So that's extra money that they don't need to be spending. But the real payoff is these concrete blocks. Now, I live in Northwood, and then if I come out the back street there, Northwood Lane there, onto North Street, and this is an invitation to your listeners to have a look at this, just one example of how they put these concrete blocks out there. If you're coming off the McDonald Bridge, heading up North Street, you got to look at this to see how 9 laborers and the big truck put these concrete blocks almost halfway out into the road. And then they get it on the other 2 corners of Northwood. There's these concrete blocks. I mean, there's one street on the way home I come, and I'm lucky to get the turn to get in there. Where it used to be 2 lanes, it's basically almost down to 1 lane right now to try to maneuver, and cars behind you, you're trying to get around. These bike lanes, I don't know how we ever got into this thing, that all this money is there waiting to spend to waste.
I don't understand it either, Bill. I often ask the question, if the federal government says, look, hey, we've got $15 million for you to spend, but you have to spend it on bike lanes, can we not say no and just, they keep their money?
Well, they could put on housing, they could put homeless, they could put in so many things. But bike, I don't know what they're trying to prove. They're going to put more cars off the street, off the road, or what they're trying to do, because that ain't going to happen. I'll tell you just a final thing here. I think we got to look at the NDP here. Now, I hate to say this now because I've always been a pretty strong Liberal, but I almost went VC, but the NDP there maybe is worth looking at, because we did not need this election coming up. So that's my little take for today. What do you think?
I appreciate the call, Bill.
Thank you.
902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Raised that question when we were talking about bike lanes during the municipal election, and I think it was when we were having a chat with Pam Lovelace, who was running for mayor, and said, well, the feds came to us with some fund that they were saying, like, look, we've got this amount of money that you can have, but you have to spend, I think it's 17% is that you have to kick in from the municipal government, so 17 cents on a dollar, or I guess is the way that you say that, but it has to be to bike lanes. And if the opposition is strong against bike lanes, and I can only go by what I hear here on this radio station, then can't you just say, well, thanks, Justin, but the people don't want them. It just feels like when we get these programs, these infrastructure programs, like, look, you have to have, do you remember when the pandemic ended and it was, you have to have shovel in the ground ready projects, and, we got to hurry up and get this done, that we just rush through so that we can get the money before dad takes the wallet away. Right? Would it not behoove us to just sit back, listen to what the people are saying, and focus on things that they want, rather than the federal program that this thing's a part of? My rant for the day. Let's go to the telephone lines and welcome Mark to the show. Mark, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to address a few things regarding Paul Russell. I live in downtown Halifax. I don't have any skin in the game regarding the race over in Sackville or their issues. But just for a little context, I mean, I know Paul. I haven't talked to him in a while, but politics is definitely a very strange thing. So for people who don't know, he sought the federal nomination in 2019. I think it would be 2019 election, federal election. And the nomination process was a tie. And he lost and you can look it up, he lost by a coin toss or however they break a tie. So that was the best thing that ever happened to him politically. Then he was, because then it freed him up to run for council, which he got. And then he lost, and now he's running again. So it's pretty, I'll say it's pretty shady and sketchy the way that things have set up. But also there is that context as well. So he has been obviously gunning for some sort of conservative nomination for a long time. And so it shouldn't be really a surprise to anybody. But anyway, that's it. But yeah, it doesn't look great. Like you, I won't offer Mike, I believe his name was Mike, the caller, any advice rather than run yourself if you want. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic, or even spoil your ballot, because that gets checked as well. But last thing I want to say, with regard to politicians breaking their promises, we should institute something called recall.
Right.
Okay. And put a high threshold. But I don't want this to be a frivolous process where everyone's trying to be recalled, because then nothing will get done and no one's going to want to run. But I think if you get, I don't know what it is in BC or California, but they have a pretty high standard, a certain percentage of the voting public. If in a district, or if it's provincially, it might be a bit difficult to recall a premier. But I think that people should be able to do that if they're, if someone is egregious enough to really not listen ever to your constituents. And I'm not singling anybody out here. I think that should definitely be a function of our democracy. And that's about it for me.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. The problem with recalls is that whenever you have an election, there's a segment of the population that's not going to be happy, no matter what happens. And and I understand Mark's line of thinking, and it makes sense that the threshold should be really high. But if you can get, and I'm just throwing a number out there, 65 or 70% of people in a jurisdiction to agree to have a recall election, it doesn't mean you can fire the candidate. Somebody gets recalled, they have an election, right? It's not, you can't say there's the door, we're going to put somebody else in there. That's just not how it works. But if we had a recall mechanism, then I think it would, and a large majority of voters in specific jurisdiction have to support that, then I think the sour grapes, and I'm putting quotes around that, of losing election, and that this, no matter what this person does, they're never going to be right, and we need to recall them now. I think that eliminates that. What I really think we need is this at the federal level. Just watch what's happening with the Prime Minister right now. He's got a revolt in his caucus. He's got a mutiny happening. But yet there's no way that a party can remove him as leader. It doesn't exist. That just doesn't seem right. Need to stop and take another break. The open hour continues on the other side of it. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. We're back in minutes.
Thanks.
Welcome back. A few minutes left here in the open hour. A couple of lines open if you want to get on. 902-405-6000 is the number. Let's welcome George to the program. George, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
A couple of things. The federal Liberals, they've made the most egregious domestic policy ever when they implemented that carbon tax. And I think that if you're a Liberal, a Tory, or NDP across the country, the vast majority of people do not like it. And even if they replace Trudeau, with someone else, the Liberal Party's going to wear this one after the vote.
Yeah, they're not. I don't think I've taken more than one phone call on somebody that liked the carbon tax.
Yeah, no. I get a carbon tax rebate, but I don't even think it's close to what I'm spending on gasoline between the family and everybody.
Yep.
And another thing, I don't live in HRM, but those bike lanes that the people are, I guess most of them don't like it. Why can't they make those bike lanes seasonal in there, just like school buses come out every September? Why can't they make them seasonal?
I have seen in other places, George, where they have protected bike lanes with bollards that they remove in the wintertime because they live in a snowy area and they're worried about them getting destroyed by the snowplows. So it may be an option. Exactly. I don't know if it's more expensive to do it that way or not. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Well, I think they could put, like Bill was saying there, they have poles in the ground. They could put that up every spring.
Right.
And you do an advertising blitz in the spring when they're coming in, just like they do for school, telling everybody the bike lanes are in to watch what you're doing.
Fair enough.
I don't know. Seems simple to me. Right. And everybody be happy, I think.
There you go. George, you're a problem solver.
Hey, thank you.
All right, 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. I'm sure there's a number of councillors that will have the answer for why that we've gone with permanent lanes instead of temporary ones. If that's probably, and I'm just guessing, is a much more costly solution to the whole thing. But again, I will implore everybody that is getting ready to get sworn in on the 5th of November that we just, because the money's there doesn't mean you have to spend it. Take a look, take a breath, talk to your constituents, and then act. I don't think that's too much to ask, is it? Let's go back to the phones. Ed, how are you?
Good, Dan. How are you today?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
U.S. politics real quick. But before that, did I hear you say that Tim Houston is saying he will take off the tolls from the Halifax bridges if he's elected?
He did.
That's brilliant.
I just don't know how he does it, but that's what he's promised. He promised it this morning.
Well, that's something, Dan, that a lot of people, it's something like that. People hate paying that toll. So if he's taking the tolls away, that's gonna get him a lot of votes. I'm telling you.
Oh no, and I'm not suggesting it's bad. I just don't know how the mechanism works because I thought Halifax Harbor Bridges was a like a private company, and I don't know what the mechanics are, but that's the promise, is that he's going to take the tolls off.
That's great. I mean, that's going to win a lot of votes for him.
Fair.
U.S. election. I got a prediction here for you.
Sure.
Kamala Harris winning 270 to 268 on the electoral college vote next Tuesday.
Wow. Yeah. That is a tight one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very tight one. There's 7 battleground states.
Yep.
I've got her holding on to the blue wall, which is Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And then she wins one of this Nebraska, one state that allows winners by districts. She'll win the Nebraska 2 district and win the election by 1 electoral college vote.
Can you imagine? Wow.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Prediction for you, buddy.
Well, that'll be much watch TV, man. Like people will be glued to their sets because that won't happen in a couple hours. That'll be weeks before they decide that, right? Because I'm sure each of those races is going to be tight.
Yeah, they're going to be very tight. Are you going to have Mark Brewer on this week? I haven't heard from him lately.
I don't know if we'll get him on this week, but we'll certainly try to get him on Tuesday of Election Day.
One other quick thing. It happened last week. I want to throw this at you. I found it very, I'm not sure disturbing, but you had a caller there last week. He calls a lot of time. He's very anti-liberal. I think his guy's name's Sean.
Okay.
He said on Election Day that he went in with a friend.
And they switched names. Yeah.
That's actually election fraud.
It's
actually a criminal. It's a criminal thing that. So.
I agree that it's election fraud, but the scary part was he's able to do it.
Yeah, the scary thing is he's able to do it, but you're not supposed to be able to do it, and I'm just saying it's actually illegal what he did. So I wouldn't really be going around bragging about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but he did raise an interesting point that he was able to do it. Nobody asked any questions. Not to say, and I don't condone it. Absolutely don't. It's illegal. But it does raise a few eyebrows, at least in my world.
No, it certainly does. But, anybody can try to scam the system, I guess. But maybe we need to get more people security-wise looking around. But still, what he did is criminal. So, anyway, just something I wouldn't be bringing up that I did.
Ed, appreciate the call.
Thanks, Dan.
902-405-6000. I certainly don't condone that kind of behavior. It is illegal. It is against the law to misrepresent yourself. That being said, there was but there was some discussion about security during this past municipal election and the ability to vote as somebody else. And that's what he did. I agree with that. I wouldn't be bragging about it either, considering that it is a criminal act. Gary, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. I'm doing fine. The bicycle lanes, Dan.
Yep.
I hate to keep on talking about the Sambro Loop bus, but I got to conclude this in it because Sean Clary was one of the movers and shakers that got rid of our bus, but instead they said it was too expensive because there wasn't that many people using it. But then we turned around, we got $2.2 million worth of bicycle lanes that hardly anybody uses out here around the Sambro Loop. Secondly, I listened to him the other day. He said he gave some excuses as to why bicycle lanes are not causing the traffic jams. And he said there's no bicycle lanes on Quimple Road, Shabaka Road. And he said, how can you blame the bicycle lanes on the traffic that's going up to those roads? Well, just like Bill, coming off the bridge, you got those bump outs up there on
North
Street there, and right by Northwood Manor. They do come out quite a ways, and including the bicycle lanes that are all around the city downtown, choking off the streets. I don't know how safety vehicles get through, and along with all the construction that's going on. No, bicycle lanes are not totally to blame, but I can tell you that they play a big part. And when you go down around University Avenue, it's so hard to get around. You see people going around and around in circles looking for parking spaces, and meanwhile, you got a million cars coming in from the 103, the 102, the 101, and I don't know where the hell they're all going. I travel this HRM extensively. And the amount of people that I see on bicycle lanes, they said they built them for the future. Well, the same people that were using the bicycle lanes 5 years ago are not using the bicycle lanes today. So it's not really growing. And the percentage that I've been hearing back when they started all this, it's basically the same as it is today. So the reasoning that they're going to build them and they will come is not true. And I've been down around Florida. They got streets that are 6 lanes wide with bicycle lanes, and you still don't see anybody hardly using them down there. So I just don't understand why Sean Clary is so hell-bent on creating more bicycle lanes, millions of dollars to boot, and we got a housing crisis on top of all that. And the reasoning he took off the Sambro bus is the same reasoning that he's given to creating bicycle lanes. It goes against what he's saying. It's just crazy, Dan. Anyways, that's my rant for today.
Thanks, Gary.
You take care.
902-405-6000 is the number. We'll reopen those telephone lines tomorrow, but don't forget it's Wednesday. So Dr. John Gillis will be here at 11. The open hour goes at noon. We need to stop and take a break. On the other side of it, it's time for Science Files. Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University is here to answer your science questions. So get ready, get set. We'll start after the break.
Axe.
Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. It's time for Science Files. He is Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, and he is here for the next hour to answer your science questions. Something that you saw, something that you've been thinking about for a while, or something that has piqued your interest in the science realm, of course. Dr. Rob is here to try and answer that question. 902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000. I don't want to see how many dimples are there on a golf ball or why is the sky blue, although that there is some physics to that.
Both of those are interesting questions. I mean, golf balls don't have a set number of dimples. They have different designs now. Right. But why is the sky blue? Rarely scattering. That's also a cool thing as well.
See, look at that.
Yeah.
All these years you've been thinking, why is it blue? And Rob knows the answer.
Yeah. So, but no, someone call in with a golf ball and I can talk about a golf ball. But no, it's funny how actually that was discovered, how dimples on a golf ball were discovered. So it goes back in the history of golf, right? Mm-hmm. And initially they started with, I think it was something called gutta percha, a kind of rubber ball that was completely smooth on the outside. And they found, as they got beaten up, they actually flew further. Right. And so then they thought, oh, there's something going on here. And it's actually related to turbulence on the boundary layer around the golf ball. And so that's when it all started. They started sort of like creating dimples and uneven surfaces. They had dimples that came out originally, I think. And then they realized it was better if they went in. Yep. And
it breaks the surface area up and it less drag, right?
You have less drag because the surface is able to detach from all by sort of like literally going over these little dimples and so on. And that just slows or lowers your overall drag. Yeah.
So then why don't aircraft have dimpled skin?
Because with aircraft, you're looking primarily at the flow over the wings. That's the key thing there.
It's not about it. The drag is part of the effect, but it's the lift that we're really looking forward.
Yeah.
See, look at that.
Yeah.
The world science problems
even
answered.
The crazy thing is, even understanding lift is way harder than the explanation that we actually tend to sort of like give of like, oh, it's going over the top faster than it is along the bottom.
And it's a pressure differential, right?
It's actually related to vorticity and the flow over the wings. This is the sort of vortex theory of lift. And that's probably the most technically accepted explanation of it, although there is sort of arguments along the momentum side as well. But it's kind of fun how there are all of these different ways of explaining lift. Yeah.
Now, how do birds do it?
They flap very effectively,
which is thrust.
Yeah,
right?
On top of having the aerodynamics of their feathers as well, right? But I mean, some animals, I mean, you get down to very small scales, and then you start getting into sort of like insects and so on, and their flight is actually quite difficult to understand properly because there will be like boundary layer effects and things like that.
Like a big old bumblebee that's not aerodynamic at all, still can fly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the idea, bumblebees shouldn't be able to fly, that's not true, but they rely upon a different kind of mode of lift as opposed to, say, a big California condor.
So it's thrust can compensate for drag, right? Which is one of the four forces. I'm learning stuff, right? It's one of the four forces, and the more you can compensate for a lack of lift through excess thrust,
as long as you're sufficiently small,
right? And these things are like tenths of ounces, right? So it doesn't take a lot to make them move forward.
Yep.
There you go. 902-405-6000 is the number. 902-405-6000. This one's going to get you, Rob.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting ready to come to work yesterday, and Mother Nature had been playing with her artistic palette on the hood of my truck.
Mm-hmm.
And I had these brilliant designs in the frost. Any idea what contributes to those wild designs that we see, particularly when it's this time of the year and it's damp when we get an overnight frost?
So I'm not entirely sure, but I can speculate, right? And so when you have crystal growth on an object, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an issue with the interaction of the heat associated with something freezing and the thing that it's on top of as well. There's probably a connection there. I don't know for sure. That leads to certain formations happening. And depending upon the surface that you have, you'll see different types of structures that come out just because of the nature of the interaction between the ice crystals and the metal that it's actually forming ice on.
Because some will say that each of those crystals are unique, right? Like
they are.
Two snowflakes are never the same.
Precisely.
Right?
Precisely. Because when you're crystallizing, you're going from a liquid state where there's just a little bit of movement and you're freezing in. And the way that freezing happens, the atoms are trying to arrange themselves in the lowest energy state possible, but they don't always do that. Sometimes they get sort of like locked into a position that's not quite optimal, and then you'll have another thing come along that will bind on and you'll be left with that crystal structure.
It was wild.
Yep.
It was like somebody had taken the scraper that you use when you're putting drywall putty on the wall and took it.
So it was like sharp lines.
And it was circular, right? And it looked like it was a circular, like there was a bunch of them. The whole hood was covered, and it was my vehicle's black, so it really stood out. Mm-hmm. And it was a circular pattern, but it almost looked like that somebody had laid it out like a floor.
So I've seen like really long spindly things. In fact, one of my most retweeted tweets ever was a really sort of like strange circular form that came around in kind of like a spiral, which I wouldn't have believed it unless I'd seen it. And then I popped it onto the Twitter, and who was it? Who was the Prime Minister's former secretary, Gerard? What's his
Butts?
name? Yes, Butts. He retweeted it, and then, of course, everyone retweeted it after that. So, yeah. But no, the particular patterns you can see can be quite different depending
and complex.
Upon... Yeah, very much so.
It was wild. I should have never thought. Should have took a picture of it, but I've seen obviously Jack Frost.
I'm surprised you didn't take a picture.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
It was that time in the morning, and you know how it is. I hadn't had my coffee yet.
Should have taken a picture.
Right, but it was really wild, and in fact, it was a shame when the engine heated up enough that it melted it off. But it was bizarre, and I've seen many different kind of patterns. We all have when we've scraped our windows off in the morning, but this one was circular, so it was just weird. I thought maybe it had something to do with the wind currents, but anyway.
Well, possibly. I mean, the thing that I'm trying to wonder about in my head, and I don't honestly know enough about this to know for sure. Funnily enough, there's a guy, Peter Poole, at SaintFX, who's famous for doing research into ice and how ice forms. But I suspect that if you have very, very calm situations and the water is just cooling down very slowly, you could actually create supercooled water, which then its crystallization is going to be so sudden, it could actually create really rather unusual kinds of formations. And I wonder if that ever happens. I don't know. It's an interesting thing to conjecture about.
We're going to get an update this week. In fact, is it not today, on Artemis 3 and the moon landing? Is that happening later today? NASA's going to give us
honestly,
an update?
You're
See,
ahead of me
on
the... Well, it says the news guy.
It's kind of my job, Rob.
Yeah, exactly. So I haven't heard about that, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is... Well, it depends. Like, one of the things that's happening is that Elon Musk is surprising the heck out of everyone with Starship Heavy.
Oh, not just that, but we're talking about the space program now.
Yeah. And so I wonder if they're going to say something about the planned timeline for this because of what's been happening at SpaceX. That might be a
And they're also talking about different places where they can actually going to put this thing down on the moon, right? There's I think they had, 9 of them that they discovered are appropriate
landing sites.
Appropriate landing spots. What do you do? Do you look for absolute flat, or do you have to have a specific kind of ground?
The challenge with it is you can't really know for sure what the small bouldering levels are. Now, with the lander that they're going to be using, there are a lot of questions about whether it's going to kick up a lot more dust. Like anyone who's seen even the Apollo 11 landing video or film. So you can see the dust kicking up there. And now you've got to imagine something that literally is probably 10 times heavier coming down. So there's actually been a couple of studies published recently saying, not so sure you want to be landing a 100-ton spaceship on the moon. Have you really thought about that? And so that's a genuine concern. And I wonder if they'll say something about that too.
We're going to, Apollo 11 must have been a dusty studio that they filmed that in. Oh, there comes the conspiracy theories. Need to stop down and take a break. Science Vaults continues on the other side. He's Dr. Rob Thacker. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. We're back in minutes. Always a happy day when this song hits in the Todd Veinotte Show music recorder rotator, as we call it. It's that's one of my favorites from the Rolling Stones. Anyway, moving on. Science Files continues. 902-405-6000. Dr. Rob Thacker is here to answer your science questions, and we'll hit to the phones and welcome Mike to the show. Mike, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good. Your question for Dr. Rob, please.
My question is, so when you're driving down the road, this is probably a dumb question, and you're at highway speed, and you have your back windows open, and you get that thump, 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 thump. What causes that, and why does it go away if you crack one of your front windows?
So my guess is what you've got there is an oscillator being set up. And so there's going to be a connection between the air that's in your car, the air that's outside, and then the space between the air in your car and the space outside. And so depending upon whether that's big or small, that will create a resonator, right? It's much like kind of a bit like a pipe organ in a funny kind of way, if you think about it. Right, okay. And so that's the situation you've gone. You've created a situation where there's literally a specific frequency that's going to be associated with the system, and it's low. So because of that, it's going to sort of like go up and down over a period of a second or two. So it will probably go thump, 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 thump. Yep.
Okay, and then when you crack your front window just a little bit.
So what you do when you do that is then you actually change the internal pressure, and any sort of like you have the way to think about it is you'll have a sound pressure or a pressure wave of a certain wavelength, and then when you crank the actual window down to relieve the pressure in there, that pressure wave won't be able to bounce off anything in the same way. You'll be actually relieving the pressure in the cab, and that will actually get rid of the resonance.
Oh, okay.
There you go, Mike.
Thank you.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000. It's 902-405-6000. Is that the same principle that, and I'm going to date myself here, back in the day, I was a cigarette smoker, and I'm 20 years clean, I would like to say.
Good.
But when you would have a cigarette going in your car and you would crack the window, it would the smoke would evacuate very quickly out the window. That pressure differential, right?
That will be literally the fact that you have a low pressure area outside because the air is flowing past the car so far. So it will literally just suck it out.
It still stinks. And I don't recommend smoking in a car.
No, although funnily enough, my wife and I actually bought a car that was a smoker's car because it had a discount, and then we paid to have a deep clean, and smelled fine.
Can't tell.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was years and years ago, though.
902-405-6000, 902-405-6000 is the number. We welcome Harvey to the program. Harvey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Your question for the doctor, please.
It's not really a question. It's more about an observation. I've been reading a book that came out in 2023 called The Secret Life of the Universe, an astrobiologist's search for the origins and frontiers of life. And to give you her credentials, she's the director of the Carl Sagan Center at the SETI Institute.
Sure.
So, and Carl Sagan is a hero of mine, by the way. So.
And mine too.
Yeah, no, Cosmos changed my life, actually.
And mine too.
No, that's why I have so many telescopes. I think I've called you before. Yeah, you can't get lost in telescopes, but it's incredible that we have the history of England, we have the history of Russia, but we don't have the history of the planet Earth. And I've been
in what context?
No, we have the history. I'm just slowly starting to understand it. That's what's intriguing to me. Like one thing she made a point of is that the reason we have oxygen in our atmosphere is because of blue-green algae, who invented something called photosynthesis.
Yeah.
And started oxidate, and I think it's still happening right now. Actually,
oh, for sure. I mean, not only the algae. I mean, we have plants and forests doing this all the time as well.
Yes, and we have a carbon tax in Canada, which that's totally political, and I don't.
And I'm not going to touch it with a barge pole.
Yeah, Justin is going bye-bye. Just read The Prince. It's a great book. It's the only biography written about him, and his wife.
Stephen Marr, by the way, who's been on this program many times.
Yeah, no, like I said, and by the way, you're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you.
But what is fascinating to me about this book is that the planet has an impact on life, like Darwin of course, figured out a few hundred years ago. But the Earth also has an impact on life, and it's a back and forth kind of thing.
I mean, I'd go further than that. I mean, the sun has a massive impact on life as well.
Yes, that's why there used to be a sun gods.
I mean, when you really get down to it, not every single piece of life on this planet is powered by the sun, but the vast majority of it effectively is, right, via photosynthesis.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to talk about, and she talks about this in her book, is Europa.
Yep.
And
yep.
The Clipper was just launched. I don't want to die right now until we find out that there is other life outside of this planet.
Okay.
And last week you said you believe that, but you went into some detail about why it's likely not intelligent life, like Star Trek.
Yeah. Sure. That's called the rare earth hypothesis. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally believe that there can't be other places in this galaxy, in this universe, that does not support life. It just boggles the mind.
I think that the likelihood is just based upon how quickly the fossil record of our own planet suggests life evolved here. That really is strongly suggestive that it must be able to evolve pretty quickly elsewhere. It's the complex life with the so-called eukaryotic cell, with the nucleus that allows you to have multicellular animals. That looks to be quite a bit harder, and we don't fully understand how all that happened, to be honest.
And they've recently found that Mars has got a whole bunch of water under its shelf.
Well, I think people think there are these big lakes on Mars, but that's not really accurate. I mean, there's evidence of water deposits, but it doesn't always necessarily mean they're gigantic subterranean lakes.
But here's I guess this is my other question to you. There have been so many revolutions in science, and I love science. What will be, and I probably won't be alive when this happens, by the way, what will be the outcome when we find out that life has existed on another moon, Saturn, by Jove, or anywhere else? What will that have as an implication for humanity in terms of we are not alone in that regard?
So I think that's an excellent question, and I've wondered about this, and I don't have a really concrete answer on it. And so my real concern about this is I think if we found a signal like, I don't know, the three-body problem talks about that, or any kind of SETI signal that suggested technology, that would be a very profound thing for people. A lot of people would be worried. A lot of people would be concerned. If, on the other hand, the form of life that we find is bacteria, that's going to be quite a lot less profound for a lot more people, right? From a purely philosophical perspective, it will be important. There's no question. We will realize that the planet that we live on is not perhaps quite as special as we think it is, although please don't take that to mean that we shouldn't make huge efforts to look after this planet, because we should, right? But it might make us feel that, we're not quite as special as we think we are. Right. And so I think in the scenario in which we find life, whether it's on I would love it if we found evidence for life around Europa or something like that. That would be incredible. But I think we're going to find it by looking at planets around other stars, doing what we call spectroscopy of the atmospheres of those planets, and seeing if there is a lot of, say, free oxygen and things like that, or biomarkers. And I think my hunch is I actually have a bet with a former graduate student about this. We have 2 bottles of wine that are waiting to be hopefully opened within our lifetime.
They might be vintage by the time that happens.
They will be. I'm convinced of that. They definitely will be vintage. And so nonetheless, I think that we'll probably find it via looking at the atmospheres of planets around other stars, and that will not be quite the same impact as finding a SETI signal.
Harvey, appreciate the call. We need to take a break. Science Files continues on the other side. You're listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to Science Files. He's Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University, and I, of course, am Dan Ahlstrand, and we're here for the next 30 minutes to answer your science questions. If you have a question, the telephone number is 902-405-6000. We'll go right to the phone lines. We'll welcome Ryan to the program. Ryan, how are you?
Pleasure to speak to both of you today.
What's on your mind? What's your question for the doctor?
It's about photosynthesis. Now, energy can't be destroyed. So what I'm wondering is, with photosynthesis, the energy that comes from the sun, the plants effectively turn that into mass. So are we gaining mass, biomass, especially on this planet, through energy from the sun? Is that being converted to mass? That's basically the question.
So here's the thing, right? So whenever you have a chemical reaction that involves an energy transfer or an energy creation, whether it's exothermic or endothermic, there is a tiny, tiny, tiny mass change associated with that, but it's absolutely minuscule, right? Because energy and mass are the same thing. It's really, really tiny. And so when you compare that to, say, the energy from the nucleus, right, which you have in either fission or fusion, then the changes in mass that you have there are significant. I mean, they're large enough that they can be measured effectively. Whereas for a chemical reaction, because the amount of energy involved is so small, the change in energy is actually really, really tiny and minuscule, right? And it's not something you really think about in terms of chemical reactions. I think that's the best way to frame it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ryan. 902-405-6000, 902-405-6000. A couple of emails have come in, Dr. Rob, and I will read them to you.
Sure.
Dr. Rob, gravity is, this from Mark, by the way, gravity is a phenomenon of the distortion of space and time by mass, correct? That's the question.
Yep. I mean, it can be by other, like radiation will also distort space-time as well, but mass is good enough if you want to sort of talk about things that will do that, sure.
The follow-up is, if this is a good definition, how does this apply to the tiniest of scales, say, like at a subatomic level?
So at a subatomic level, then things get pretty difficult, right? And so if we go down to the very, very tiniest scales that we can think of, which is something called the Planck scale, then we literally don't know what's going on with space and time, right? And so this is literally what people like Stephen Hawking, Einstein were trying to figure out, and we haven't got far enough along with it. But when you get down to, say, the size of the nucleus is still a long way above that scale. And on the scale of the nucleus doesn't give a hoot with gravity. It's a very, very weak force, ironically, compared to the nuclear forces. The nuclear forces are incredibly strong in comparison. Like, it's orders and orders of magnitude, 10 followed by many, many zeros, right? And so we don't particularly worry about gravity with something like a nucleus, although there is one situation in which that is important, and that's for what we call a neutron star. Right, and a neutron star is made up of subatomic particles called neutrons, all compressed down together. And so that is the one sort of situation where you can think of a neutron star in some ways as being like a giant atom, all held together by gravity. Right, which is a very, very unique state. We don't fully understand what's happening. There's a possibility of the quark-gluon plasma in the internal structure of the neutron star and so on. We really don't know what's going on there, right? But that is the scale on which gravity really does have an impact in nuclear physics.
Now, at the subatomic level, is there still gravity that's observed, or is it too minuscule or impossible to record?
Yeah, you would. Well, I mean, I don't know how. So if you were asking me, can we measure like gravity on the scale of separations of the nucleus? I don't know whether anyone's tried to do that. I think someone was doing, Nima Haqqani Ahmed, he was trying to do very, very small scale tests of gravity to see if there was any sort of like hints of additional dimensions, right? But I don't think they found any, but I can't remember what scales they were working on.
It's just, that's pretty small, right? Like
it's really tiny. So there is an argument that if there are sort of like hidden dimensions that are wrapped up and so on, as you get down to very, very small scales, you should see some departures from normal gravitational behavior. But it's very, very difficult to make those kind of measurements.
Also got an email from Andrew, who said, we were to our talk of my psychedelic frost on my hood.
Okay, yep.
Well, that's not the right term, but anyway.
It's psychedelic
works.
frost.
Very well, it's cool, man. Those patterns, he says, are called fractals. They exist in nature, and then he said, for fun, look up the golden ratio. That's your rabbit hole for the day today. So I'm assuming there's something crazy that's going down there.
So fractals are a statistical object in some sense. They happen in real life as well. But when you have the same statistical properties on one size scale as you go down to another, and it can be the exact same pattern, that's the way that they are understood most often. But I've never heard, well, that's interesting. I've never heard about water freezing in a fractal way, but there's no reason why that shouldn't happen. You'd have to have, on a growing scale, a replication of a similar structure, right? So, yeah, I've got my rabbit hole for the afternoon.
There you go. The golden ratio, apparently it's called. Yeah. Anyway, we'll take a look at that when we get off the air. 902-405-6000. That's 902-405-6000. Before the program, Rob and I have a conversation. Sometimes he sends me interesting articles because he comes across something in his travels. He's like, damn, I want to know about that. I'm not entirely sure about this first one.
It makes me sit there. Dad needs to know about this.
Yes, but I'm not sure if there's something behind this first article that you sent me, Dr. Rob. It comes to us from The Guardian, and it says that animals become less sociable as they age in similar ways to humans. I don't know if you're saying that I'm antisocial, Dr. Rob, but why is that? Why do animals shy away from one another when they get older?
It's for my students, so they understand why I'm such a grumpy cuss.
Right. Fair enough.
Yeah, there we go. So I thought this one was really interesting, and there's actually a whole series of papers in this study, but really they were trying to understand why animals show different socializing behaviors. And so it's probably not entirely conclusive, but they come to the conclusion that, yes, there are a number of examples of animals that show very similar declines in social interactions the same way humans do with age. So rhesus macaques, monkeys was the example that they gave. And so the justification, and I'm not entirely convinced by this, but the justification for this is, as an evolutionary adaptation, as you become older, you are more susceptible to viruses. So if you have less interactions as you're older, particularly for preening animals and things like that, then that will actually reduce your potential for viral interactions and lengthen your lifespan. But I'm not always convinced that a long lifespan is actually something that evolution would basically select for. I'm not sure I necessarily believe that.
Well, we keep the strongest around, right? Like that's
it's really about fitness for reproduction,
right? Yeah, absolutely.
That's the key thing, right?
And the interesting part about this, and as I was sitting around thinking about it, I understand that, from my interactions with animals is, looking at wild animals in this part of the world where there's a hierarchy, right? There's, particularly in the male of the species, there's always, if they're a herd animal, there's a dominant male, and that animal, is challenged all the time. And once that domination or that dominance is set, they kind of just leave them alone, right? Until rutting season.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say herd animals, whales is dominant females.
Well, fair. No, absolutely.
Right?
No, absolutely. Yep. But, I'm thinking lions and
lazy male lions,
right? The ones that anyway. But that's anyway less sociable.
I'm teasing I'm teasing.
I mean, it makes sense, right? Like you're older, you don't want to talk to people because you're worried you're going to get sick, right?
I actually think part of it may be down to energy. I think socializing takes energy, right? And you simply don't have the same level of energy.
Takes energy
when you're
more
older.
often than not, depending on the interaction with the person, right?
Well, okay. And so I actually think that might be part of it. That literally it takes energy to do that. Now you can say, what about relaxing interactions? Okay, sure. But just being completely frank, if you're an older person interacting with, 4 or 5, 6-year-olds, that takes a lot of energy.
100%.
It really does, right? And so I can see that older macaque monkeys wouldn't want to interact with very young macaques, right? I can see that.
Does the oldest of the macaque monkeys sit on a porch in a rocking chair and yell at the clouds?
Probably.
Need to take another break. You're listening to Science Files. I'm Dan. He's Dr. Rob. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to Science File. I'm Dan Ahlstrand. He's Dr. Rob. The telephone number is 902-405-6000. Before the break, we were kidding about the articles that Dr. Rob sends me, and he sent me another one. This one from the BBC, go figure. And it's about barcodes, and the long story short is the URL on that thing says the black and white lines that went into space and stoked fears of the Antichrist. How are barcodes the Antichrist?
So that's actually a very clickbaity headline for the BBC. But anyway, so this goes back to the 1970s, right? I mean, and I think for a lot of people of my age, it's a bit of a surprise to learn that barcodes have been around since actually the idea for them goes back to 1949, right? And the first scanning barcodes for grocery stores was the 70s, all right? And we didn't see them in the UK until much after that.
Oh, I remember distinctly as a child through the 70s and 80s, the old school, cash register where you went right?
Yep. And you had all of the people on the tills typing everything in. But anyway, so that actually goes back to when they first started coming out and people didn't know what they were. There was a book, there was a report about how these things were the mark of the devil, right? And so it was made up, people sort of like having a certain fantasy about what these things actually were. But it got picked up in a number of different places. And then you fast forward to the 80s and you have the Terminator movie, right? James Cameron. And lo and behold, Reese, one of the rebels, comes down and he's got a barcode stamped on him. Right. And so that kind of thing has just permeated popular culture. In some countries, it's become more of a thing than in other countries. I will say that. I think they're so ubiquitous in North America. We don't often hear about people freaking out over barcodes here. But in other countries, it's been a bit of a thing.
I will tell you that
this is going to be your freak out story for barcodes.
When I was when I was in the military in the mid to late 90s, right after James Cameron's movie.
Mm-hmm.
When you are a member of the military, and I know lots of you out here are, you get a number. It's called a service number, right? Way back when used to use our social insurance number. Mm-hmm. Turns out that's probably a bad thing because people can steal your identity with that. Then the military switched to a service number, and it was a 9-digit number with a letter and 8 digits on it. Anyway, I knew a lot of people.
They got that tattooed?
That got that barcode tattooed on their body somewhere so that they could be scanned. And then we kind of realized that, hey, wait a minute.
You might not want to do that.
Might want to do that. But anyway, that's where it came from. That was my story with the barcodes. You see this guy walk around, my barcode. It's like, what's
dude, no, you don't want to do that.
Right? Antichrist.
So what I didn't know is apparently the barcodes work on the basis of the separations between the edges of lines.
Yes.
Right? Which is kind of neat because if you have a very bad printer, you can still print barcodes that work, which I thought was quite
because they're probably
fun.
built for dot matrix printers, right?
Yep. They would have been because, I mean, oh gosh, how many people know what dot matrix printers are?
I know we're aging ourselves.
All right.
Remember the little strips you have to pull off the paper, and then what do you do with the strips?
I just remember the noise from the things. I can't even do an impression of it. It was so horrible. But anyway.
I'll tell you that in the early days, and then we're going to go down a rabbit hole, but in the early days working in news, we had a large dot matrix machine. It had its own room. And it was where the broadcast wire used to come from.
Yeah.
And when that thing, there was ear defenders, hearing protection that you would wear to go in there. That's how loud it was.
So they estimate that 10 billion barcodes are scanned every day globally. I actually think that's a low number.
I think it's low too because everything you buy is a barcode.
Everything you buy,
plus the QR codes that are available now.
8 billion people on the planet,
right.
So okay, you can say, well, not everyone who's purchasing things within that is using a barcode, but you've still got at least however many billion in developed countries where those things are absolutely ubiquitous, and all you have to do is go to the store and buy your weekly shopping, and there you've done like 300 barcodes in one go.
Right, and how many just in Halifax does that happen a day?
Yeah, this is a really good problem in estimation.
See?
Yeah, there we go.
I think your students are going to get a job. Sorry, guys.
So,
Rob, by the way, Rob's students listen to the program, and if they are, and I know they are, I'm sorry.
Are you apologizing for me or you? That's the question.
Well, we'll let that to be decided. 902-405-6000 is the number, 902-405-6000. And the last article that you sent me is the Doomsday article. and that is 3.26 billion years ago.
Yeah, but
we saw an asteroid the size of 4 Mount Everest hit Earth.
So this is a good doomsday, right? And so I actually brought this in because it's going to make people think about what these events actually do, right? And so we all talk about the dinosaur impact and all of the species that were killed by that and so on, and how that led to a different type of evolution post the event and so on. And so with this, they're talking about an event 3.26 billion years ago when it was literally single-cell life on the Earth, different types of single-cell life. But the key thing is this impact was so huge, right, that you would have literally had a tsunami sweeping across the ocean, stirring up all of this iron, and then putting that in places where it wasn't, right? And so this would have had the impact of changing the bacterial populations, right? There would have been phosphor as well deposited, they think, with the asteroid. There must be a large sort of like surface layer of phosphor that they found. That's my guess anyway. And so this was a way of changing the evolution of the Earth, right? And I thought that was really interesting because we always tend to think about these events in a very negative way. Oh, all of these things were killed off. But when you've just got single-cell bacteria with different populations in different places, this actually had an impact of stirring things up and changing the future of a particular evolution of these archaea or bacteria as we can think of them. And that's cool, right? Because it's not something being a negative, it's something being a positive for selecting life going forward. So,
I mean, do we know where that asteroid or that meteorite would have hit?
So they think, where were they looking? They were looking somewhere in Africa, if I remember correctly. But I mean, that's where it is today. You go back 3.26 billion years ago, you're looking at completely different continental distribution.
Well, we were all one big chunk, right?
I would have guessed. I mean, we've been through that stage a couple of times, right? So things have broken up and come back together again. So there was Rodinia, what is it called? And then there's another one as well. I can't remember them. I'm not a geologist. So I think this would have had a very significant impact. I mean, the fact that they're talking about it impacting coastal regions as well, presumably it happened in a certain place and then the tsunami went across the ocean and then came back on the other side. But with something that's four times the size of Everest, that's a ridiculous amount of
So
energy.
there might be a big rock somewhere with all kinds of minerals on it, Rob.
Yeah, no, this is what but this is what they've been analysing, because this is all geologists who are looking at these particular deposits and trying to infer what I mean. It's the Barberton Greenstone Belt of South Africa. There we go.
So now we know.
Yep.
So now there's going to be a bunch of people out there looking for meteorite stones to see if there's any gold in them.
Oh, no, these things are going to be difficult to determine from basically anything that was naturally occurring at the time. Right.
A tsunami, here's a physics question for you. A tsunami caused by a rock of that size would take how long to travel around the Earth?
So it's going to be going at least 1,000 miles an hour, so it's going to be a few hours. Right.
So it can circumnavigate the planet in a couple of hours.
Something that big, yeah, that's going to actually get around the Earth, because you're going to have a wall of water. If it's in a deep enough area, you'll literally create a wall of water that's associated with the displacement of the water itself. Now, it changes height depending upon the level of the shallowness of the water that it's in. So that's one of the reasons why as you go to a shallower area, it actually gets taller, right? So when these things start off with so, for example, anyone who's seen the videos from Japan in 2011, that's still mind-boggling.
Man, it was
when you see
wild.
But you can see the initial tsunami as it comes in.
Draws the water out before it gets there, right?
Right, yeah, at the very end as it's coming in. But there's boats that went over it, right? And you can go over it. It's not too bad. But by the time that thing hits shoreline, there's a movie that I found on YouTube that I've actually shown my class in classical mechanics sometimes. You can see this 30-foot wall of water, right, coming towards you, and it makes you quake looking at it, right? Those poor people, right? It's actually fortunately done from quite a long way away with a telephoto lens, but it was just, crazy.
And just the energy, but it's the one.
Yeah, because you're depositing all of the energy associated with the Earth's mass moving into the water, right? And that's a huge amount of energy right there, right? I mean, there's obviously energy going into the seafloor as well, but you've literally just moved a whole sheet of the Earth. I think it was 3 or 4 meters down. I mean, that's just a ridiculous amount of energy.
Now that we've talked about the doomsday, We're out of time. Thanks, Dr. Rob. We'll see you next week.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, everyone, for the great questions.
And thanks to you for picking up the phone and dialing the numbers. Thanks to all of our guests for joining the show. Thanks to Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass. Have a fantastic day. Stay out of trouble. And remember, be kind to one another.